Hi everyone. So the Housing Act has now received royal assent. It's quite a broad-ranging piece of legislation, introduces quite a large number of different policy changes. And what I want to do really is just talk through maybe four of the main ones. And I'm just going to kind of summarise what the changes that are introduced are and say a little bit about what their likely impact will be. Before I get started, just a couple of things to note. The Act applies to England only, doesn't affect other parts of the United Kingdom. And just because the Act has now received royal assent, that doesn't mean that every individual element within it will be implemented immediately. Individual sections of the Act will still need to be enacted, and at this stage the timetable for a lot of this actually being introduced is still not really known. So the first area that I want to talk about is starter homes. So government said they want to provide 200,000 of these by 2020, and there'll be homes exclusively for first-time buyers aged between 23 and 40, and they'll be 20% cheaper than a normal new build home. And what the Act does is it requires local authorities to promote the provision of starter homes in their area, and it now looks increasingly likely that government will actually require a certain percentage of homes on all new build sites to be starter homes. So our concern here really is that while starter homes will certainly benefit some aspiring first-time buyers, in a lot of cases it looks like they won't necessarily be additional new homes. They won't be over and above what would have been built anyway, and we're concerned that they might in fact be simply pushing out homes that would otherwise have been built for affordable rent. So starter homes are likely to benefit one group of people, first-time buyers, but only directly at the expense of another group, people who are waiting for social housing. So the second area that I think is really significant is the sale of higher value council homes. So we don't yet know exactly what the definition of higher value will be. Government are going to set that out at a later date. But what we do know is that they will calculate for every local authority in the country that still owns some housing stock, how much they believe that that council would be able to raise in sales of higher value homes per year if they were to sell every one that became vacant. And those councils will then be required to pay that amount of money to the Treasury on an annual basis. They won't necessarily be required to actually sell each of those homes, but of course the fact that they'll need to raise that amount of money will mean that the flexibility for them to decide not to sell this property but to sell another one instead will be a little limited. The intention here is that the money raised from those sales will be used partly to fund the discounts for housing association tenants who are exercising their right to buy, and partly to build replacement homes on a one-for-one basis or two-for-one in London. And we're concerned that where we've done research on this previously, it suggested that the amount of money raised from high value sales might not be sufficient to cover both the costs of right to buy discounts and building replacement homes. So our research suggested that up to 7,000 council homes a year could be lost if additional money wasn't put into this scheme. And of course, this is part of a wider trend whereby we're seeing a reduction in the number of homes available for social rent as a result of not only this, but also conversions to affordable rent, the ongoing sale of council homes under the right to buy. And in total, we've estimated that we could lose around 370,000 social rent homes by 2020 compared to 2012 levels. And then there were a couple of areas of the Act that were quite significantly changed as it passed through the House of Lords. So one of these, for example, is pay to stay, which is the policy that will require council tenants who are higher earning to pay a higher rent. So this will apply to initially council tenants who earn more than £31,000 a year or more than £40,000 a year in London. And this was, as I say, amended quite significantly in the House of Lords, so it will now only be voluntary for housing associations, mandatory only for councils. We'll also see the thresholds uprated with inflation every year, and we know now that tenants who are in receipt of housing benefit will be exempt from the policy. Those amendments, I think, have gone some way towards addressing our concerns, but we still do have some worries about the policy. In particular, I think it will still apply to a lot of people who couldn't really reasonably be considered to be higher earners, particularly because the thresholds apply to the income from a household rather than an individual. That means that a couple who each earn £15,500 a year, which is only slightly over the new national living wage, would be affected by this policy. Also, we're concerned that it will be very expensive and very difficult to administer, and that it will reduce incentives for working council tenants to try to earn more, as they'll be keeping less of any additional income that they earn than any other household would. So their rent will be increasing by 15p for every pound that they earn over the threshold. And lastly, the other area that's important is the extension of fixed term tenancies. So here the Act will require that all new council tenants will get a tenancy for a fixed term rather than a traditional secure tenancy. And this is another area that was amended quite significantly in the Lords. So the original proposal was that those tenancies would last for a maximum of 5 years. We now know that they'll be able to last for a maximum of 10, or if the household has a child under the age of 9, they'll be able to be given a tenancy that would last until that child is 19 years old. So we would welcome those changes. We think that they will give individual councils a lot more freedom to take local need into account and individual circumstances compared to a kind of quite arbitrary 5-year cut-off. We would, however, like to see councils also retaining some flexibility to suggest exemptions to this. I think there are some areas where traditional secure tenancies are still needed. There are some cases where they are still much more appropriate. And the Act does allow the Secretary of State to set out some exemptions. So he could possibly do that in regulations at a later date, and we'll be looking out for that. So for more information on any of this, download our member-only briefing, which is available from our website. We're also running some events on the Housing Act, and there'll be a member-only webinar as well. So have a look on our website for details of those.